The first voice came from beneath the earth. If you had been standing out there on the dry ranch that morning, you would have thought the old man had finally lost his mind. He dropped his shovel, stepped back from the hole, and stared at the ground as if the dirt itself had spoken his name. Before I tell you what happened under that ranch, do me one favor. If stories about courage, family, and impossible discoveries mean something to you, like this video and subscribe to the channel. And stay with me until the very end, because the last thing he heard from beneath that ground changed not only his life, but the lives of people no one even knew were still there. For nearly 40 years, Elias Mercer had lived alone on the western edge of Red Hollow, a stretch of forgotten land where the wind never seemed to stop and the summers baked the earth until it cracked open like old pottery. He was 68 years old, broad-shouldered once, though time had bent him slightly forward. His beard had gone white long before his spirit had. His hands were rough enough to tell the story of every season he had survived. In town people called him stubborn. Some called him proud. The truth was simpler. He was a man who had buried too much and kept walking because he did not know how to do anything else. His wife Clara had died 12 years earlier. Fever took her fast. One week she was standing on the porch laughing at the rain, and the next Elias was lowering her into the earth with hands that trembled so badly he could hardly grip the rope. Their only son, Nathan, left not long after. He was 23 then, angry at the ranch, angry at the drought, angry at a father who believed staying was the same as fighting. Their last conversation had ended with hard words neither of them could pull back. Nathan had climbed into an old truck and disappeared toward the city. For 11 years there had been no letters, no calls, only silence. The ranch remained, but barely. The creek had dried up years ago. The cattle herd had shrunk from 42 to 6 thin animals that wandered the pasture searching for grass that was no longer there. Every month Elias sold something. First equipment, then fencing, then part of the north field. By the beginning of that summer, only the house, the barn, and 60 acres remained. On a July morning, he stood by the kitchen window with an overdue notice from the bank in his hand. He read it 3 times even though he knew every word. Payment due in 30 days. Final warning. He folded the paper carefully and placed it beside Clara's old photograph. "I'm trying," he said to the woman in the frame. "I just don't know if it's enough anymore." That afternoon he saddled his old mule and rode to the far edge of the property where the ground dipped between 2 ridges. His grandfather had once told him there had been water there generations ago. Not much, but enough. Elias had laughed at the memory for years. Now he had no room left for pride. If there was even a chance, he would dig. He started the next morning before sunrise. The first day was brutal. The soil was packed hard as stone. Every shovel felt heavier than the last. Sweat soaked through his shirt. By noon his back burned. By evening his palms had split open. He went to bed exhausted and woke before dawn to do it again. On the 3rd day, Martha Bell drove out from town with groceries and a face full of concern. Martha had been Clara's closest friend. She was 72 now, sharp-eyed, practical, and one of the few people who still came around. "You're digging your own grave," she said. "Looking for water. At your age." "At my age I don't have time not to." She stood there watching him for a while. "You should call Nathan." He kept digging. "You hear me?" "Yes. And I'd rather argue with dirt." Martha sighed. "You men carry pain like it's a badge." "It's not pain," he said quietly. "Then what is it?" He looked down into the half-formed pit. "It's what's left when you run out of words." She didn't answer. She just left the groceries by the porch and drove away. A week passed. The hole was deeper now, nearly 9 feet. Still dry. Elias had begun to think the land had finally beaten him. His knees ached every time he climbed out. At night he sat on the porch staring at the stars, wondering how much longer he could keep pretending tomorrow would be different. Then, on the 9th morning, his shovel struck something that was not stone. The sound was hollow. He froze. He crouched and brushed dirt aside with his hands. Underneath was wood, old wood, dark with age, laid flat beneath the soil. He stared for a long time. No one had mentioned wood. No one had spoken of anything buried there. He climbed out, fetched a pry bar, and spent an hour clearing the edges. The boards were fitted together like a hatch. When he finally wedged it loose, a breath of cold air rose from below. Cold air. In the middle of summer. He stepped back so suddenly he nearly fell. Under the hatch was darkness. And stone steps. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. For several minutes he simply stood there, trying to decide whether he was afraid or astonished. Then he fetched a lantern, tied a rope around his waist, and descended. The staircase was narrow, cut into packed earth reinforced with stone. Every few steps dust drifted down from above. The air grew colder. 20 feet down the steps ended in a tunnel barely tall enough for him to stand. The lantern light trembled. He moved forward slowly, and then he heard it. A voice. Faint. Human. Hello. He stopped breathing. He thought for one wild moment that grief had finally cracked his mind open. Again. Is someone there? It was a woman's voice. Thin. Distant. Real. Who's there? Elias called. Silence. Then whispers. More than one voice. His lantern shook in his hand. He backed away so fast he scraped his shoulder against the wall. He climbed those stairs faster than a man his age should have been able to move. When he reached the surface, he stumbled onto the dirt, gasping. He did not sleep that night. At dawn he drove into town and went straight to Sheriff Tom Hale. Tom was younger by 15 years, practical and skeptical. You found what? A staircase. Underground. And voices. Tom leaned back in his chair. Voices. Yes. You sure it wasn't wind? Wind doesn't ask if someone's there. Tom studied his face for a long moment. He had known Elias too long to mistake fear for imagination. By afternoon they were both at the ranch. Tom descended first, revolver at his side, lantern in hand. Elias followed. At the end of the tunnel they heard it again. Whispers. Tom turned sharply. His face had gone pale. Well, he muttered, I'll be damned. The tunnel bent sharply to the left and opened into a chamber. It was larger than either of them expected. Stone walls, old wooden supports, rusted lantern hooks, broken crates, and on the far side, behind a partial collapse of rock and timber, a narrow opening. That was where the voices came from. Tom called out, Hello. A woman answered, Please, help us. For one terrible second neither man moved. Then they dropped to their knees and began clearing debris. It took nearly an hour. First came a hand through the opening. Then a face. A young woman, dirt-streaked, exhausted, eyes wide with fear. Behind her were 2 children. A girl of perhaps 10. A boy no older than 7. And behind them, another woman, older, supporting herself against the wall. Elias felt his chest tighten. Good Lord, he whispered. They were shaking with hunger and terror. The older woman's name was Lena. The younger was her daughter Rose. The children were Emma and Caleb. Between broken breaths, Lena told the story. 3 days earlier, while traveling through the hills in an old truck, they had taken a wrong road after dark. A washed-out section of earth had swallowed one side of the vehicle. They escaped before it slid farther, but the ground gave way beneath them. They fell through into the old underground chamber. Part of the tunnel collapsed behind them. They had no way out. No one had seen them. No one knew where they were. They had been calling for help until their voices grew weak. Elias stared at the little boy, whose lips were cracked from thirst. He removed his canteen and pressed it into Caleb's hands. Easy, he said softly. Small sips. The boy looked at him with enormous frightened eyes. You heard us. Yes. You came. Yes. The child's lower lip trembled. I thought nobody would. That sentence struck Elias harder than any blow. Because for 11 years that was exactly what he had believed about himself. By sunset the family was above ground. Ambulances arrived. So did half the town. By morning the story had spread across 3 counties. Reporters came. Cameras came. People who had not visited the ranch in years suddenly remembered where it was. But Elias cared about none of it. He sat quietly on the porch while Emma and Caleb drank lemonade Martha had made. For the first time in years, laughter floated across the yard. And something in him began to loosen. 2 days later, Sheriff Hale returned carrying an envelope. They found this in town, he said. At the post office. Forwarded from your old box. Elias frowned. The handwriting stopped him cold. Nathan. His hands shook as he opened it. Dad, I don't know if this will reach you. I heard from Martha the ranch was in trouble. I should have written years ago. Truth is, I didn't know how. I was angry when I left. Then ashamed for staying gone so long. I have a daughter now. Her name is Clara. She's 9. She asks about her grandfather. I tell her you're the strongest man I ever knew. If you'll have me, I'd like to come home. Elias read it 3 times. Then he sat there staring at the hills until the light faded. 3 days later, a pickup truck rolled slowly down the dirt road. He knew it before it stopped. Nathan stepped out first. He looked older, tired, his hair thinner, but he was still the boy Elias remembered beneath the years. Then a little girl climbed out behind him. She had Clara's eyes. For a moment nobody moved. Nathan walked forward. "I'm sorry," he said, voice breaking. For all of it, Elias tried to answer, but emotion caught in his throat. So he stepped forward and pulled his son into his arms. Both men held on harder than they meant to. The little girl watched solemnly. Then she asked, "Are you Grandpa?" Elias laughed and cried at the same time. "Yes," he said, "I am." That autumn changed everything. The story of the underground rescue brought attention. People donated equipment. Volunteers repaired fencing. A local drilling company offered to finish the well for free. And at 37 feet, they found water. Real water. Clear and cold. The day it surged upward, Caleb and Emma were there visiting with their mother and grandmother. Clara was there too. All 3 children shouted and ran through the spray while the adults stood laughing. Elias looked at the water and thought of the voices beneath the earth. He had gone digging because he thought he was trying to save land. He had found people. He had found family. He had found himself. That night everyone gathered on the porch. The sky burned orange and purple beyond the hills. Nathan sat beside him quietly. "You know," he said, "for years I thought leaving would make me free. And did it? No. Coming back did." Elias nodded. He understood. Before bed, little Clara climbed into his lap. "Grandpa." "Yes." "Were you scared when you heard the voices?" He smiled. "Terrified." "Then why did you go down there?" He looked out across the dark pasture, where wind moved softly through the grass. "Because sometimes," he said, "the thing waiting in the dark isn't there to hurt you. Sometimes it's there to lead you back to what you lost." Years later, people in Red Hollow still told the story. They spoke of the rancher who dug for water and found a staircase. They spoke of voices rising from underground. But the part Elias treasured most was not the mystery. It was what came after. A broken family healed. A lonely house filled with footsteps. A dry ranch brought back to life. And if you ever pass through Red Hollow on a cool evening, you might see an old man on a porch with 3 children racing across the yard while laughter drifts over the fields. You might think it looks ordinary. But he knows better. Because sometimes the earth does not open to swallow what remains. Sometimes it opens to return what was missing. And maybe that is worth remembering in your own life too. There are seasons when everything feels dry. Seasons when prayers seem unanswered. Seasons when silence feels heavier than hope. But keep digging. Keep going. Even when all you hear is emptiness. You do not know what is waiting just beneath the surface. Sometimes the voice calling from the darkness is the very thing that will bring you home. And if this story stayed with you, like the video and subscribe to the channel. There are more stories ahead. Stories about ordinary people who keep digging until life answers back.